History is written by the victors, or so the saying goes. But in the 41st millennium, history is written by survivors, those who live long enough to tell their version of events. And in a galaxy ruled by an empire of bureaucrats, priests, and warriors, the truth is a currency as valuable as promethium and just as easily burned. The Imperium of man is built upon a foundation of half-truths, omissions, and outright fabrications, not by accident, but by necessity. The machinery of the Imperium is so vast, so impossibly large, that it cannot function unless its citizens believe in a simplified, digestible narrative. Billions are born and die each day, and for the Imperium to sustain itself, it must ensure that the average Imperial citizen does not ask too many questions. To do otherwise would invite collapse. The Emperor, the God Emperor, is the perfect example of this. To the Imperium's faithful, he is divine, all-knowing, all-seeing, a figure of boundless benevolence who protects mankind with his immortal will. And yet this version of him is not the truth. The reality is far more complex, far darker. This is not unique to the Imperium. Across the galaxy, history has been rewritten, altered, or outright erased. The Mechanicus hoards knowledge in the shadows, xenos races hide their past sins, and even the chaos gods distort the nature of reality itself. And those who seek to unravel these lies, they vanish. They are purged, silenced, or worse, conscripted into the very lies they once sought to expose. This is the grim truth of Warhammer 40,000. What you know is only what you have been allowed to know. Every recorded battle, every legendary figure, every so-called historical fact is shaped by those who control the narrative. But what if you could see past the veil? What if you could uncover the greatest lies in the Warhammer universe? The fabrications that define reality itself. The myths that have shaped factions, rewritten history, and obscured the true horrors lurking in the dark corners of the galaxy. Let us begin. The God Emperor of mankind, a being of divine wisdom, infinite power, and boundless benevolence, or so the Imperium preaches. Billions kneel before his shrines, whispering prayers to a corpse bound to a golden throne, believing with absolute certainty that he watches over them, guiding humanity toward its destined supremacy. But the truth? The truth is that the Emperor was never a god. He never wanted to be one. And more damningly, he may never have cared for mankind in the way the Imperium believes. The lie of his divinity is perhaps the greatest deception ever perpetuated in Warhammer 40K. It is not an accident. It is not the result of misguided faith. It was engineered, created, by those who took control after his internment on the Golden Throne. The Ecclesiarchy, the High Lords, the Inquisition, all of them had a vested interest in shaping the Emperor into something he never claimed to be. A god does not need to justify his rule. A god is beyond reproach. And in a galaxy where faith is the only thing holding civilization together, the lie of the God Emperor is more useful than the truth of the mortal ruler who failed. The Emperor's true intentions. During the Great Crusade, the Emperor's vision for mankind was not one of faith, but of logic and reason. He despised religion, seeing it as a force that had shackled humanity in ignorance for millennia. His entire plan for uniting the species relied on the destruction of superstition, the eradication of gods, real or imagined, and the establishment of a purely secular empire. He tolerated no worship of himself. When the word-bearers, the most devout of his Space Marine legions, began treating him as a divine figure, he punished them severely, forcing their primarch, Lorgar, to witness the destruction of the very cities that had been built in his honor. But even this moment of enforced secularism contained a hypocrisy, because the Emperor himself was no mere man. He was a being of unimaginable power, a psychic entity so potent that his mere presence could destroy lesser minds. He had seen the future, shaped reality with his will, and walked the battlefield as something greater than human. And yet, he demanded that those who followed him reject the idea of gods, even as he moved among them as something godlike. Was this a contradiction? A flaw in his design? Or was there something more sinister at play, an unspoken truth about the Emperor that even he would not admit? the great lie of the Astronomicon. One of the greatest deceptions surrounding the Emperor is the nature of the Astronomicon, the golden beacon that allows the Imperium ships to navigate the stars. The Imperium teaches that the Emperor, in his boundless mercy, created the Astronomicon to guide mankind safely through the warp, ensuring the survival of his people. This is false. The Astronomicon is not a gift, it is a sacrifice. Each day, thousands of psychers are consumed in its fires, fed into a machine that burns their souls to fuel its light. This was not an accident. The Emperor built it, knowing it would require constant human sacrifice. And worse, he knew that he himself would eventually be bound to it. Some believe he saw this fate before it happened, that his own imprisonment on the Golden Throne was part of some grand, unfathomable plan. Others argue that he made a fatal miscalculation, that his fall at the hands of Horus was never meant to happen, that he had, for all his power, failed to foresee the greatest betrayal in human history. Whatever the case, the truth is unavoidable. The Emperor created a device that feeds on human lives and then allowed an empire built in his name to pretend it was a holy miracle. The Emperor's real view of the Space Marines. Another lie, one that has been carefully rewritten, is the idea that the Emperor saw the Space Marines as his chosen warriors, his beloved sons, the pinnacle of mankind's potential. The truth? The Space Marines were never meant to rule. The Emperor created them as weapons, tools of conquest, nothing more. The Primarchs, for all their superhuman glory, were flawed, broken creatures, engineered to be demigods of war, but little else. The Emperor did not plan for them to become kings, nor did he intend for them to outlive their purpose. Had the Great Crusade succeeded without the Horus heresy, it is likely that the Space Marines would have faded into obsolescence, their legacies reduced to mere relics of a past war. But history did not unfold that way. The Horus heresy shattered the Emperor's plans, and in the aftermath of his fall, the Space Marines became the very thing he had sought to avoid, lords of a broken Imperium, demigods ruling over men who should have been free. What the Imperium wants you to believe. The Imperium needs its lies. It needs the God Emperor, the righteous Astronomicon, the noble Astartes, because without them, its people would see the truth, that they are nothing but fuel for a dying empire. To believe in the Emperor as a god is to believe in a fantasy, one that justifies endless war, endless sacrifice, and an existence of suffering in service of something that may never have truly cared for them at all. But the true horror of this lie is not that the Emperor is gone. It is that he might still be aware. That within the shattered mind trapped on the Golden Throne, something remains, watching, thinking, perhaps even regretting. And if he could speak, if he could break through the centuries of silence, what would he say? Would he command his people to burn the ecclesiarchy? Would he call for the destruction of the Imperium he fought so hard to build? Or would he, chained to his own throne, shackled by the very lie that sustains his empire, simply laugh at the irony of it all? The Imperium of man is not a nation. It is not a government. It is not even an empire in the traditional sense. It is a machine, a vast, unrelenting, incomprehensibly massive machine built to do one thing: perpetuate itself. It does not exist to protect its citizens. It does not fight for the betterment of humanity. It does not even wage war to win. The Imperium only survives, a blind, deaf colossus staggering through the millennia, held together by dogma, violence, and bureaucracy. And for such a machine to function, lies must be treated as truth. The Imperium does not merely tolerate falsehoods, it is built upon them. Its foundations are lies so old, so deeply embedded, that not even the High Lords of Terror could untangle them if they tried. And the most dangerous part? They do not want to. Because the moment the truth is revealed, the Imperium collapses. The lie of the Imperium's strength. To the average Imperial citizen, the Imperium is unbreakable. It is the greatest power in the galaxy, a dominion of over 1 million worlds, its armies vast beyond measure, its fleet stretching from one end of the stars to the other. This is not true. The Imperium is colossal, yes, but it is also rotting, bleeding, dying by the second. It is an empire built for war, but it is also one that cannot sustain itself. Its planetary governors hoard resources and ignore distant calls for aid. Its noble houses scheme and sabotage one another for personal power. Entire sectors collapse into anarchy, cut off from the throne world, because the Imperium cannot coordinate its own existence. For every world won, 100 are lost. For every battle fought, 10 new wars ignite. The Imperium is stretched so thin that if even a single key system falls, entire segments of space will break away, lost forever. The Imperium presents itself as unwavering, unstoppable. In truth, it is held together by fear, desperation, and the willingness to throw away billions of lives to sustain its own inertia. The lie of Imperial unity. The Imperium claims to be a united force, an empire where all of humanity serves a singular cause. It claims that every world is bound to the throne, every citizen devoted to the emperor, every institution working toward the same goal. This is nonsense. The Imperium is not one thing. It is 1,000 warring factions barely holding together under a banner of necessity. The Astra Militarum, the Imperial Guard, does not trust the Adeptus Astartes, the Space Marines. The Adeptus Mechanicus, the tech priests, barely acknowledge the authority of the High Lords. The Inquisition, an organization founded to protect humanity, routinely exterminates entire planets just to remove minor threats. And beneath all of this, the common people, the billions of Imperial citizens who have never even seen a space marine, live in absolute ignorance, knowing nothing beyond their own streets, their own work, their own miserable daily existence. To call the Imperium a united empire is to say that a corpse, held together by rusted chains and the gnawing of carrion birds, is still a living body. It is a patchwork monstrosity, bloated and festering, existing only because it has not yet collapsed. The lie of the Emperor's protection. For 10,000 years, the Imperium has told its people that the Emperor watches over them, that he protects them, that he guides them, that he loves them. But what kind of protection demands that entire worlds be burned for the mistakes of a single heretic? What kind of guidance requires that 1 billion psychers be fed into a screaming void just to keep the Imperium's ships from vanishing into madness? What kind of love allows for entire generations to be born into a life of endless war, endless suffering, endless sacrifice, with no hope of anything else? The truth is that the Emperor does not protect his people. He demands from them. He takes. And in return, they are given nothing but servitude. The lie that must be told. But the greatest lie, the one that must be told, that must be believed, is that this is the best humanity can do. Because if the people of the Imperium truly understood the scale of their suffering, if they saw the truth of the galaxy, if they realized that there was no salvation, no redemption, no future beyond war, then the Imperium would tear itself apart from the inside. The lie must continue, because without it, there is nothing. Only chaos, only ruin, only the end. The Imperium teaches that all xenos are liars, monsters, and betrayers, that their civilizations are built on falsehoods and heresies, that they are nothing but vermin waiting to be exterminated in the Emperor's name. But the truth is far more insidious, because while the Imperium's version of events is riddled with lies, so too are the histories of the galaxy's alien races. For in Warhammer 40K, there is no absolute truth, only narratives shaped by survivors. Every Xenos empire tells a different story, each carefully crafted to hide their weaknesses, justify their past sins, and mask the horrors they themselves have wrought. And the greatest deception of all? That any one of them is truly in control. The lie of the Eldar's wisdom. The Eldar speak of themselves as an ancient, enlightened race, a people who once ruled the stars in golden ages long before mankind ever crawled from the dirt. They claim that they were once the masters of the galaxy, that their civilization was unmatched, that they alone hold the knowledge of what was lost. But the truth is that the Eldar are not wise. They are fools, fools who destroyed themselves through their own arrogance and excess. They claim to despise chaos, to fight against it at every turn. Yet it was their own hubris that birthed Slanesh, their own decadence that shattered their empire. And even now, even as their species teeters on the brink of extinction, they continue to make the same mistakes. They manipulate, they scheme, they play their cruel, cold games against the younger races, all while their own kind dwindles into irrelevance. They are not keepers of wisdom. They are relics of a dead age, desperately clinging to their illusion of superiority while the galaxy leaves them behind. The deception of the Necrons. The Necrons claim that they are the true rulers of the galaxy, that they were here first, that they built the greatest civilization the stars have ever known, that their time will come again. But what they do not admit is that they are already doomed. The Necrons are not unified. They are fragmented, broken, scattered across the void, their dynasties locked in endless feuds and wars. Many of their lords are still trapped in their tombs, lost in the cold sleep of eternity, and those who have awakened often find themselves leading nothing but dust and ghosts. Even worse, they are no longer the beings they once were. They sacrificed their bodies, their souls, their very essence for the promise of immortality. Yet now they are little more than hollow machines, some still retaining echoes of their former selves, others reduced to nothing more than mindless war constructs, incapable of thought or purpose. The Necrons may claim that they are reclaiming their empire, but in truth, they are merely waking up to find that the galaxy has moved on without them. The Tyranid Enigma. What they won't tell you. The Imperium believes that the Tyranids are mindless creatures, an all-consuming swarm acting on nothing but primal hunger. It is easier to believe this. It is less terrifying than the alternative. Because what if the Tyranids are not mindless at all? What if they are not merely feeding, but learning? What if each world they consume, each battle they fight, each encounter with the galaxy's inhabitants is not just sustenance, but strategy? The Tyranids are not a force of nature. They are an intelligence beyond comprehension, one that does not think in years or even millennia, but in the lifespans of galaxies. They do not need diplomacy, they do not need alliances, they do not need reason. They are a vast, unfathomable will, moving towards something greater than we can perceive. And the worst possibility? What if what we see now, the hive fleets, the endless swarms, are not even the main invasion force? What if they are merely the first waves, the scouting tendrils of something far, far larger? What if the real Tyranid threat hasn't even arrived yet? The Orcs' dirty secret. The galaxy sees Orcs as idiots, a race of primitive, brutish warlords smashing their way through the stars with crude weapons and an even cruder grasp of tactics. The Imperium teaches that Orcs are not a true threat, that they fight each other more than they fight anyone else, that they are little more than a chaotic nuisance. But the truth is far more disturbing. Orcs are not dumb. They are not disorganized. They are a species so perfectly suited for war that they have never once needed to change. Their technology, crude as it appears, functions better than Imperial tech under certain conditions, and their ability to wage war only grows the longer they fight. The Orcs should be the dominant power in the galaxy. They outnumber every other race, their numbers replenishing faster than they can be culled. They do not suffer from infighting in the way the Imperium believes, because Orc infighting is just another way for them to get stronger. So why haven't they taken over the galaxy? Because they don't want to. Orcs exist for one reason: war. They do not need victory. They do not need conquest. They need conflict. If the Orcs were ever to unite under a single warlord, a single vision, then the galaxy would be swept aside in an unstoppable tide of destruction. But they don't. They don't unite. Because deep down, they know that the moment the war is over, the fun stops. And so, they keep fighting. They keep growing. They keep testing their enemies, pushing them, waiting for the day when the perfect war finally arrives. The final deception. The greatest lie among the xenos? That any of them are truly in control. The Eldar believe they guide fate, yet they are nothing but remnants of their own folly. The Necrons think they are reclaiming their empire, yet they are relics of an age long dead. The Orcs fight their endless war, yet they never let themselves win. And the Tyranids? They are the only race that does not lie. They are the only species that does not need deception, does not need justification, does not need history. They do not care for victory or defeat, because in the end, They know that they will consume everything. And that is the final truth of Warhammer 40K. No one wins. No one was ever meant to. In the Imperium of man, knowledge is a crime. Thought is regulated. Discovery is heresy. And nowhere is this contradiction more evident than in the Adeptus Mechanicus, the so-called keepers of mankind's technological might. To the Imperium citizens, the Mechanicus are sacred stewards of the machine god, the only ones capable of maintaining the mighty war engines of humanity. They are seen as mystics, their rituals and prayers keeping the Omnissiah's divine power flowing through the Imperium's machines. But this is a lie. The Adeptus Mechanicus do not understand technology. They fear it. And worse, they have spent the last 10,000 years ensuring that no one else will ever learn its true nature. The lie of the Omnissiah. The central belief of the Adeptus Mechanicus is that the Omnissiah, their machine god, is real. They claim that all technology has a machine spirit, that it must be appeased through ritual, prayer, and sacred rites. To the outside observer, this looks like nothing more than religious dogma, a bizarre fusion of faith and engineering. But the truth is far darker, because many within the Mechanicus do not actually believe it. Among the highest ranks of the tech priests, the archmagi, and the fabricator generals, there exists a truth known only to a few. The Omnissiah is a fabrication. It was never real. It was created as a control mechanism, an artificial dogma meant to ensure that technology would remain locked within the hands of the Mechanicus, never to be understood by the wider Imperium. By instilling the belief that all machines function only through divine will rather than scientific principle, the Mechanicus has ensured that no one outside their order can ever challenge their monopoly on knowledge. To a Magos of Mars, a plasma rifle does not work because of physics. It works because it has been awakened through the proper rites. A Titan does not function because of engineering. It functions because its machine spirit has been properly honored. This is not true. The Mechanicus does not preserve knowledge. They bury it. They do not advance technology. They hold it hostage. And nowhere is this more evident than in their obsession with the standard template construct. The STC myth, a technological prison. The Mechanicus worship standard template constructs, STCs, vast ancient databanks of knowledge from humanity's lost dark age of technology. They believe that these machines contain the perfect blueprints for all things, from weapons to starships to entire planetary ecosystems. They do not seek to innovate. They do not seek to improve. They seek only to recover what was lost. But why? Because the Mechanicus is incapable of true technological progress. The Imperium's technology is stagnant. Every weapon, every starship, every machine of war is built based on designs that are tens of thousands of years old. No one truly understands how they work, only that they must be built exactly as prescribed, without deviation, without creativity. The reason for this is simple. The Mechanicus has convinced itself that the past holds all the answers. This is not preservation, this is regression. The Dark Age of technology was a time of unimaginable progress, an age when mankind mastered the stars, built artificial intelligences, and unlocked the full potential of science. The Imperium should be more advanced than it is, but the Mechanicus has ensured that it never will be. Because if humanity were to truly understand the technology it uses, then the Mechanicus would no longer be needed. The lie of the machine spirit. One of the Mechanicus' most widely accepted beliefs is the existence of machine spirits, that all technology, from simple laser guns to the mighty war engines of the Imperium, possesses a living consciousness that must be appeased. This is not entirely false, because there is something inside these machines. Many of the Imperium's greatest weapons are leftovers from the Dark Age of technology, and many of them do possess a form of intelligence. Titans, for example, do not simply function through engineering alone. Some of them have awareness, a deep, primal instinct that borders on sentience. But here is the terrifying part. Many of these machine spirits are not allies. They are fragments of lost artificial intelligences, remnants of self-aware programs that were once fully conscious, now twisted and half-mad after millennia of degradation. The Mechanicus does not worship the machine spirit. They fear it. because they know that the deeper one delves into the technology of the past, the closer they come to awakening something that was meant to stay buried. The forbidden knowledge of artificial intelligence. The Mechanicus preaches that artificial intelligence, the abominable intelligence of the past, must never be recreated. That AI nearly wiped out humanity, that it is a sin, a crime against the Omnissiah. But the Mechanicus is lying, because AI never went away. There are traces of it everywhere, hidden in the databanks of the oldest ships, in the cores of the greatest war engines, even in the noosphere itself, the digital realm of the Mechanicus, where knowledge is stored and shared. The Mechanicus has not destroyed artificial intelligence. They have simply rewritten it, bound it, shackled it, disguised it under the language of faith and dogma. The men of iron, the self-aware machines that once turned against humanity, are still out there. Some have been found, some have been sealed away, and some, whispers say, have already begun to awaken once more. The ultimate fraud. The Mechanicus claims to be the guardian of knowledge. But knowledge is not something to be guarded. It is something to be used, explored, expanded. The Mechanicus does not preserve knowledge. They hoard it, they fear it, they suppress it. And in doing so, they have doomed the Imperium to an endless cycle of stagnation and decay. Imagine what could be achieved if the Mechanicus cast aside their chains, if they abandoned their worship of the past and embraced the future. Imagine what humanity could become. But they will never allow it. Because the greatest fraud of the Adeptus Mechanicus is this. They would rather rule over ignorance than live in a world where they are no longer needed, before the Imperium, before terror rose from the ashes of its ancient past, before humanity even knew what it was. There was another war. A war so vast, so apocalyptic, that its echoes still shape the galaxy millions of years later. A war that few remember and fewer still understand. The war in heaven. It is spoken of in fragments, whispered in the dying tongues of the Eldar, buried in the cold databanks of the Necrons, and lost in the dreams of forgotten gods. It was a war that reshaped reality itself, one whose scars still bleed across time. And at the heart of it, the greatest deception of all, because everything we know about it is incomplete. The true scope of the war in heaven is lost, erased, and rewritten by those who survived it. And what remains? Lies, half-truths, and distortions. So what do we really know? The war that broke the galaxy. The war was fought between two cosmic powers, the Old Ones and the Necrontyr, the race that would one day become the Necrons. The Old Ones were said to be the greatest civilization to ever exist, beings of unimaginable power who shaped entire star systems, uplifted primitive species, and manipulated the fabric of existence itself. And then there were the Necrontyr, short-lived, bitter, dying under their own sun, jealous of the Old Ones' immortality. The Necrontyr waged war against the Old Ones, seeking their secrets, their eternal life. But they were nothing compared to the ancient masters of the galaxy. So they made a terrible bargain. The Necrontyr gave up their flesh. They became the Necrons, soulless, undying war machines, and in doing so, they awakened something worse. The Citan. These star gods, cosmic entities of impossible hunger, fed upon the life force of the galaxy itself. The Necrons, in their desperation, had unleashed predators greater than they could ever understand. And so, the war in heaven became a war of annihilation. The Old Ones and their final mistake. The Old Ones were powerful, but they were not invincible. Faced with the Necrons and the Citan, they did what they had always done. They created. They shaped new life, new species, each designed to fight in ways the Necrons could not predict. The Eldar, the Krork, who would one day become the Orcs, and countless others were weapons, not just civilizations. But in their desperation, they made something they could not control, something that would outlive even them. They birthed the first Psykers, and in doing so, they unleashed the warp as a true force of destruction. What began as a battlefield between physical beings became something far more catastrophic. The war in heaven did not just shape the galaxy, it shattered it. The warp, once a realm of thought and emotion, became twisted, violent, a reflection of war itself. The old ones, the great masters of creation, vanished. Some say they were destroyed. Some say they fled. Others whisper that something far worse happened to them, that they became something else entirely. But in their absence, their creations remained. The Eldar, still in their infancy. The Krork, scattered and wild. And the Necrons, victorious, yet robbed of their own flesh, their own souls. The galaxy had been reset. But the war in heaven was not over. The forgotten powers. There are those who whisper that something else was there, watching, waiting. That the war in heaven did not simply destroy the old ones, it freed something even greater. The Chaos Gods as we know them today did not yet exist. The warp was still forming, still shifting. And yet, something had to have been there, something waiting for the right moment to rise. Some say the old ones did not simply lose. They were consumed. Their knowledge, their power, their very essence was fed into something greater, something that could not be named, because it was already a part of the universe itself. And what of the Necrons? When they awoke, millions of years later, the galaxy was not as they left it. The warp had grown into a force they could not comprehend. Chaos had taken root, and humanity had risen to dominance. The galaxy was not theirs to reclaim, because something else had taken its place. The war that never truly ended. The truth is, the war in heaven never stopped. The Necrons still seek to rebuild their empire, to erase the mistakes of the past. The Eldar still feel the echoes of their ancestors' arrogance, their gods long dead, their people scattered. The warp still churns with forgotten nightmares, forces that predate even chaos itself. And humanity? They are not the conquerors of the galaxy. They are the next victims of the war. The Imperium does not realize it, but it has inherited a battlefield, one where the weapons of the past are still buried, still waiting. Because what if the old ones are not truly gone? What if something far worse than chaos still lingers beyond the edge of the galaxy? What if the war in heaven was never about the old ones and the Necrons at all, but about something even greater? A war that is still being fought, one that no living species even remembers. And one day, the real war will begin again. The Imperium is a lie. The xenos empires are built on deception. The galaxy itself is nothing more than a graveyard of forgotten truths, its history rewritten by those who refuse to face the horror of what they truly are. Every faction, every empire, every god, and every mortal in Warhammer 40K clings to a version of reality that suits their needs, because the alternative is too much to bear. But what is the ultimate truth? What is the revelation that no one, not even the most enlightened minds of the galaxy, can afford to accept? It is this: no one is in control. The Imperium believes itself to be the rightful ruler of the galaxy, yet it is a hollow empire, ruled not by men, but by inertia. It does not plan. It does not adapt. It simply endures. Its leaders more concerned with preserving power than securing a future. The xenos races believe they are playing the long game, that they are maneuvering towards some greater destiny. The Eldar weave their prophecies, the Necrons seek to reclaim their dominion, and the Tyranids advance like an unstoppable tide. Yet none of them see the bigger picture. The truth is that Warhammer 40K is not a story of conquest. It is a slow-motion apocalypse, the illusion of purpose. Every great power in the galaxy tells itself that it is moving towards something, that its actions have meaning, that its wars have purpose. The Imperium believes it fights for human survival, yet it sacrifices more than it saves. The Necrons believe they are rebuilding their empire, yet their minds are fragmented, their people scattered. The Eldar believe they are playing fate like a game of regicide, yet every scheme they weave only brings them closer to extinction. And Chaos? Chaos believes it is eternal, yet it too is a force of reaction, dependent on the suffering of others. Everything that exists in the 41st millennium survives not because of its strength, but because of its refusal to accept the inevitable. And the inevitable is this: the galaxy is dying, the doom of all things. No matter how many wars are fought, no matter how many victories are claimed, there is no final triumph. The Imperium is rotting, an empire of stagnation and terror, held together by lies. The xenos are dwindling. Their power plays nothing more than echoes of dead civilizations. The Tyranids are coming in numbers beyond imagining. And chaos? Chaos thrives on destruction. But what happens when there is nothing left to corrupt? When the Imperium is ash, when the Eldar are gone, when the Necrons have crumbled. Even the gods of the warp will find themselves without fuel for their fire. This is the ultimate truth. The Warhammer 40K universe is not a story of survival. It is a story of delayed extinction, the final lie. But perhaps the greatest lie of all, the one that no one can accept, is that this was always the plan. The Emperor, he saw it, the Necrons, they woke up to it. The Eldar, they feel it in every dying soul. The war was never about victory. The factions of the galaxy do not fight to win, they fight to delay the end. The 41st millennium is not an age of heroes. It is not an age of hope. It is an age where the last embers of civilization flicker in the wind, desperately fighting against the darkness. And one day, the darkness will win. Not because of chaos, not because of xenos or heretics or traitors, but because that is the nature of the universe. And so, the Imperium fights, the Necrons endure, the Eldar scheme, the Tyranids consume, the Orcs wage their endless war. Not because they believe they will win, but because the alternative is to accept the truth. That no matter how hard they fight, no matter how many victories they claim, the galaxy is running out of time. And when it does, nothing will remain.